The first thing Vincent Romano saw when he entered the bridal suite was not the wedding dress. It was the bride's hand twisted in another woman's hair. The room froze around him in pieces. A marble fireplace, crystal champagne glasses, white roses climbing the walls like expensive lies. 6 bridesmaids in silk robes standing with their mouths open. Security guards halfway through the doorway. Isabella De Luca, his bride, breathing hard with her manicured fingers buried in Grace Miller's dark hair. And Grace, on her knees beside the wedding gown, plus size, flushed with humiliation. One hand clenched so tightly, her knuckles had gone pale. Her sewing kit had spilled across the polished floor. Silver needles glittered like tiny knives beneath the chandelier. Vincent did not raise his voice. He never had to. Let go of her. Isabella released Grace's hair, as if his words had burned her. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that came before men died. Grace slowly lifted her face. There were tears in her eyes. But they had not fallen. That was what Vincent noticed first. Not her size. Not the cheap black uniform stretched across her curves. Not the trembling of her hand. The restraint. Someone had humiliated her badly enough to make her shake. But she had refused to break in front of them. Isabella recovered first. She drew herself up. All white silk and diamonds. The perfect mafia bride with a perfect painted mouth. Vincent, she said, softening her voice instantly. Thank God you're here. This woman stole from me. Grace's eyes snapped toward her. I didn't steal anything. One bridesmaid gasped dramatically. Another clutched a necklace at her throat as if Grace might leap across the room and rob her next. She had her hand inside my dress, Isabella said. She came up from the basement and started touching everything. I told the hotel not to send someone like her. Someone like her. Vincent's gaze shifted to Grace. A lesser man might have asked what that meant. Vincent Romano did not need to ask. He had spent his life studying cruelty in its most elegant forms. He knew exactly what people meant when they dressed ugliness in polished language. Grace swallowed. She was still kneeling, still holding her fist closed. Vincent stepped into the room. Every guard moved out of his way. He wore a black suit with no flower on the lapel. No smile. No sign that in less than an hour, he was supposed to stand in a private chapel below the hotel and marry Isabella De Luca in front of 2 mafia families who hated each other just enough to make peace necessary. The Romano family had ruled Boston's docks for 3 generations. The De Lucas controlled half the luxury development money coming into the city. Their marriage was supposed to end a blood feud, but Vincent had not survived this long by believing in pretty ceremonies. His eyes lowered to Grace's clenched fist. Open your hand. Grace did not move. Isabella laughed once. Too high and too quick. She probably scratched a diamond loose from the bodice. Look at her. Vincent. She's terrified because she knows she was caught. Vincent did not look at Isabella. He watched Grace. Her breathing was shallow. Her cheeks were red. Her cheeks were red. A faint mark showed at her scalp where Isabella had grabbed her hair. But when she looked back at him, something sharp moved behind her fear. She was afraid of him, but not enough to obey blindly. What happens if I do? She asked. The room went colder. One of Vincent's men shifted near the wall. Stunned that a hotel seamstress had questioned him in front of the De Luca bride. Vincent's mouth did not move, but his eyes changed. Not softened. Interested. That depends, he said, on what you're hiding. Grace held his gaze for one more heartbeat. Then she opened her palm. A tiny black camera dropped onto the white wedding dress. It bounced once against the beaded bodice and rolled into the lace. The room died. No one screamed. No one breathed. Vincent stared at the device resting against the dress Isabella was supposed to wear when she became his wife. The camera was small enough to be hidden beneath embroidery, with a thread of silver wire still attached to its side. Still warm. Still recording. Isabella's face went white beneath her makeup. Grace looked at the camera, then at Vincent. "I found it sewn into the inner lining," she said quietly. "And your bride tried to take it back?" For the first time all morning, Vincent Romano looked at the woman he was supposed to marry, as if he had finally found her true face beneath the veil. "Everyone out," he said. No one moved fast enough. His voice dropped lower. "Now." The bridesmaids scattered. Security stepped back. Vincent's men entered the room like shadows taking shape. Isabella stayed where she was, trying to look offended. But fear had already betrayed her. Grace tried to stand. Her knee slipped on a fallen spool of thread. Vincent reached down and caught her elbow. His grip was firm, warm, and controlled. Grace's body went still at the contact. He released her the moment she found her balance. But the room had seen it. So had Isabella. And something dangerous began there, in that tiny space between his hand and Grace's skin. Not tenderness. Not yet. Possession before either of them understood why. Vincent turned to his capo. A gray-eyed man named Luca Santoro. "Lock down the hotel. No one leaves. Bring me the feed from every camera on this floor." Luca glanced at the device on the dress. "And the wedding." Vincent looked at Isabella. "The wedding is dead." Isabella's mouth opened. "Vincent, don't be insane. You cannot humiliate my family over some basement girl and a piece of equipment she probably planted herself." Grace flinched at basement girl. Vincent saw it. His eyes returned to Isabella, and whatever remained of ceremony vanished from his face. "You touched her," he said. Isabella blinked. "What?" "You put your hand in her hair. That is what you care about right now." "No," Vincent said. "It is what I noticed first." Grace felt those words move through her like a warning. He was not defending her because he was kind. He was cataloging violence. And now Isabella had become part of the list. The bridal suite was sealed within minutes. The hallway outside filled with Romano soldiers, DeLuca guards, hotel managers, terrified stylists, and guests whispering behind closed doors. Grace stood near the vanity, clutching her sewing kit against her stomach. She wanted to go back downstairs, back to the basement alteration room with its humming fluorescent lights and old coffee machine, back to the place where rich women dropped gowns on her table without looking at her face, back to being invisible. Invisible was safe. Invisible did not have mafia bosses staring at her as if she had just changed the shape of his life. Vincent picked up the tiny camera with a white handkerchief. His expression did not change, but his jaw tightened. "Who called her upstairs?" he asked. A hotel manager named Marina appeared near the doorway, pale and sweating. "I did. Mr. Romano." The bride requested an emergency repair. The bodice tore. Isabella's voice sharpened. Because the dress was mishandled. Grace looked up. The dress wasn't torn from wearing. Someone opened the seam from the inside and closed it again badly. Every eye turned to her. She wished she had stayed silent. But the truth had always been her worst habit. Vincent took one step closer. "How do you know?" Grace lifted the edge of the bodice with careful fingers, forgetting for 1 second that everyone in the room had mocked her for touching it. Her voice became steadier when she spoke about fabric. Fabric made sense. Fabric told the truth even when people lied. The outer stitches are couture grade. Tiny, even, angled left. But the inner repair is rushed. See this knot? It's bulky. Whoever opened the lining didn't know how to hide the end thread under the boning. They sewed fast because they expected no one to check the inside. Vincent watched her hands. They were not delicate in the way rich people meant delicate. Her fingers were work-worn, marked by needle pricks, nails short and clean. But they moved with absolute confidence over lace worth more than her yearly salary. "What else?" he asked. Grace hesitated. Isabella whispered, "Do not answer him." That was the wrong thing to say. Vincent's eyes lifted. Grace heard the threat in the silence. She looked down at the dress again. "The thread doesn't match." She said. "The gown uses ivory silk. This repair uses white polyester. Cheap. Strong. Easy to strip fast." Luca stepped closer. "Can you tell when it was done?" Grace touched the seam. Then the stiff bodice. "After the last professional fitting. Maybe last night. Maybe this morning." Vincent turned to Marina. The manager looked like she might faint. I don't know anything about that." Grace saw Marina's hand tremble. Then she saw something else. A smear of white thread caught on Marina's black sleeve. Grace's breath caught. Marina noticed her looking. Vincent noticed Grace noticing. That was the problem with dangerous men. They saw too much. "Take Marina downstairs," Vincent said softly. "Do not let her call anyone." Marina began crying before Luca touched her arm. Isabella stepped forward. "You have no authority to detain hotel staff." Vincent finally smiled. It was the kind of smile that made people remember prayers. "This hotel belongs to me." Grace turned toward him. For the first time, she understood that the basement where she had spent 2 years hemming gowns and swallowing insults was not just a workplace. It was his property, his world. And now, whether she wanted it or not, she was inside it. Vincent looked at Grace again. "You're coming with me." Her spine stiffened. "No." A few men looked at her as if she had chosen suicide. Vincent's gaze narrowed. "No. I found your camera. I told you what I know. I'm not part of this. Someone planted stolen jewelry in your locker 10 minutes ago." Grace went cold. "What?" "My men found a diamond bracelet behind the loose panel under your work table." Her mouth went dry. "That's impossible." "It is also convenient." Isabella smiled faintly. Grace saw it. So did Vincent. He stepped closer until Grace had to tilt her head back to keep eye contact. "If you leave this room alone," he said, "you will be arrested, killed, or both before sunset." Grace's voice shook. "And if I go with you?" His eyes dropped briefly to the red mark near her scalp. "Then they will have to go through me first." That should not have comforted her. It did. And that frightened her more than the camera. The hotel exploded into chaos within the hour. The private chapel downstairs was emptied. Guests in designer suits and diamond chokers were escorted into separate rooms. DeLuca soldiers muttered threats near the elevators, while Romano men stood still and silent beside them. Outside, snow began falling over Boston, soft and indifferent. Grace sat in the back of a black SUV between tinted windows and a man with a gun under his jacket. Vincent sat across from her. He had not spoken since they left the bridal suite. That silence was worse than interrogation. Grace stared at her hands. Her palms still felt the shape of the camera. She had spent her life trying not to take up space. In school, on buses, in boutiques, where clerks smiled too tightly, in hotel elevators, where wealthy brides looked at her body before her face. She had built a life out of shrinking politely. But Vincent Romano's car did not allow shrinking. His presence filled every inch of it. "Finally," he said. "Who paid you?" Grace laughed once, humorless and hurt. "There it is." His expression remained unreadable. "You were in the room. You found the device. You hid it. You know stitches well enough to explain the timing. I would be stupid not to ask." "I hid it because Isabella saw me find it." "And you didn't scream." Grace looked out the window at the snow blurring the city lights. Women like Isabella don't need proof to destroy women like me. If I had screamed, everyone would have believed I planted it. Vincent studied her. Women like you. She turned back sharply. Invisible women. Useful women. The kind people order around because they think we have no one powerful enough to object. Something flickered in his eyes. Not pity. Recognition. Do you? Do I what? Have someone powerful enough to object? Grace's throat tightened. Her mother had died owing hospital bills. Her father had disappeared before Grace was old enough to remember his voice. She had an elderly neighbor who fed her cat when she worked late, and a cousin in Rhode Island who called twice a year when she needed money. No, Grace said. Vincent's gaze held hers for too long. Now you do. The words landed between them like a locked door. Grace's pulse changed. You don't even know me. No, he said. But someone tried to bury you in my hotel. That doesn't make me yours. For the first time, Vincent looked almost amused. Careful. Grace Miller. She hated the way her name sounded in his mouth. Calm. Possessive. Like he had taken it off a page and put it somewhere private. You learned my name. I learned the names of people standing between me and a bullet. I'm not standing between you and anything. The SUV turned sharply. Vincent's eyes shifted to the front window. His body changed before Grace understood why. Then the world shattered. A truck slammed into the lead vehicle. Metal screamed. Snow burst white against the windshield. Gunfire cracked through the street. Sharp and sudden, Grace gasped as the SUV swerved. The man beside her grabbed his weapon. Vincent moved before anyone else did. He crossed the space between them, seized Grace by the waist, and pulled her down beneath him as the window beside her exploded. Glass rained over his shoulders. His body covered hers completely. The scent of smoke, eye leather, and his cologne filled her lungs. His arm locked around the back of her head, shielding her face from the broken window. Stay down, he said against her ear. Grace could not breathe. Not because of fear alone, because no one had ever protected her like that. No hesitation, no disgust, no calculation. He had moved as if her life mattered before he had decided whether he trusted her. Outside, men shouted in Italian. Tires screamed. Another shot punched through the door. Vincent lifted his gun and fired twice without looking away from the window. Grace pressed her hands against his chest. His heartbeat was steady. Hers was chaos. When the shooting stopped, the street smelled of burnt rubber and snow. Vincent did not move off her immediately. He looked down. A thin cut marked his cheek from the glass. Grace's fingers rose before she could stop them. She touched the blood at his jaw. His eyes dropped to her hand. The moment stretched. Dangerous. Intimate. Wrong. Then he caught her wrist, not roughly, but firmly enough to remind her who he was. Don't, he said. Grace pulled her hand back. Embarrassed, Vincent's voice lowered. I don't trust what I want when I'm angry. She stared at him. Before she could answer, Luca opened the door. Boss, we need to move. Vincent climbed out first, then turned and offered Grace his hand. She hesitated. Snow fell between them. Behind him, black SUVs blocked the street like a wall. Men with weapons scanned rooftops. A city bus sat abandoned at the curb. Its passengers ducked low inside. Sirens wailed somewhere far away. Grace looked at Vincent's hand. Taking it felt like stepping deeper into a life she could never leave unchanged. She took it anyway. His fingers closed around hers. And Isabella DeLuca, watching from a surveillance van 2 blocks away, understood the first mistake she had made. She had not simply failed to hide the camera, she had made Vincent Romano look at Grace Miller. By nightfall, Grace was inside Vincent's penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor. The city glittered below like cold jewelry. Snow blew sideways against the glass walls. The living room was all black marble, low light, and silence so expensive it felt unreal. Grace stood near the window, wrapped in a blanket one of Vincent's men had given her. Her uniform was torn at the sleeve, her hair a mess from Isabella's grip and the crash. Her sewing kit sat on a table beside a bottle of scotch and a loaded pistol. The contrast felt absurd. A seamstress's scissors beside a mafia boss's gun. Vincent stood across the room, speaking in low Italian on the phone. His face had been cleaned, but the cut on his cheek remained. Grace kept looking at it. She hated herself for looking. Luca entered with a tablet. The camera was streaming to an encrypted server. We traced part of the route through a shell company tied to DeLuca Construction. Vincent's expression did not change. And the target. And Luca glanced at Grace. Vincent said, "Speak." The device captured audio from the bridal suite, hallway, and possibly the private family room if Isabella carried the dress there earlier. Vincent went still. Grace noticed because every man in the room did too. "What family room?" she asked. No one answered. Vincent took the tablet and watched something on the screen. His jaw hardened. Not with anger this time, but fear. It was gone almost instantly, but Grace saw it. The feared Vincent Romano was afraid of something. Or someone. He looked at Luca. "Where is Elena?" "At the North House." "Secure. Move her." "Boss." "Now." Grace's heart tightened at the name. Elena. A woman, a lover, a daughter. The thought landed strangely. A quiet ache she had no right to feel. Vincent turned and caught her expression. "You want to ask?" Grace looked away. "It's none of my business." "Correct." His coldness should have shut her down. Instead, it stung. Grace folded the blanket tighter. "Then why am I still here?" "Because whoever attacked us knew which route we took." "You think I told them?" "I think information is leaking from somewhere close. And I'm convenient." "You're alive," Vincent said. "Convenient people usually aren't." Grace laughed softly, but there was pain in it. "You really know how to comfort a woman." His eyes darkened. "I am not trying to comfort you." "Good. You're terrible at it." Luca suddenly became very interested in the tablet. Vincent took one slow step toward Grace. The air changed. She should have backed away. She did not. He stopped close enough that she could see the faint snow melting in his black hair. "You are either very brave," he said, "or very tired of being afraid." Grace's throat tightened. "Maybe both." His gaze lowered to her mouth, then lifted again so sharply it almost felt like punishment. "Do not make me curious about you." "Grace," she whispered. "I didn't ask you to look." "No," he said. "That is the problem." Before either of them could say more, Luca's phone rang. He answered, listened, and went pale. Vincent did not turn. "What?" Luca's voice was tight. Isabella gave a statement. Vincent's silence became lethal. Luca continued. "She says you attacked the DeLuca family because you were caught with your mistress. She says Grace was planted in the bridal suite to sabotage the wedding." Grace's face drained. "My what?" Luca looked at her with something almost like sympathy. "It's already spreading through private channels. Photos from the hallway, you helping her into the SUV. The attack footage has been edited." Grace grabbed the edge of the table. Her world had been small that morning. Basement, needle, dress, Coffee. Rent due Friday. Now the city's most dangerous families believed she was the mistress of Vincent Romano. Vincent crossed to the bar and poured one drink. He did not drink it. "Call DeLuca," he said. Luca nodded. Grace's voice broke through. "No. Wait. You can fix this. Right? Tell them it's a lie." Vincent turned. "If I deny it, they call you a thief and a spy. They turn you over to police they own. You disappear in custody." Grace stared at him. "If I confirm it," he continued, "you become untouchable until they decide whether killing you is worth war." Her stomach dropped. "No." Vincent's eyes held hers. "It keeps you alive. It ruins my life. Your life was ruined the moment you opened your hand." Grace flinched. Vincent's expression tightened, as if he regretted the sharpness but refused to apologize for truth. "I won't belong to you," she said. The room went still. Vincent walked toward her until the table stood between them. "You will belong to no one," he said. "But for the next few days, the city will believe you are under my protection." "That's not what they'll believe." "No," he admitted. "It is not." Grace turned away, pressing her hand over her mouth. She thought of the hotel basement, Marina's fake smile, the women who would laugh harder now. The headlines whispered in luxury salons, plus-size seamstress, seduced mafia boss before wedding. They would never believe she found a camera. Women like Grace did not get to be witnesses. They got to be scandals. Vincent's voice came from behind her. "Look at me." She did not. "Grace." She hated that she turned when he said her name. His face was controlled, but his eyes were not empty. "I will not let them touch you." "You can't promise that." His voice lowered. "I can promise what happens after they try." That was the first night Grace realized protection could sound like a threat, and the first night Vincent realized her fear affected him more than the attack on his convoy. By morning, Grace Miller had become the most dangerous rumor in Boston. A grainy photo circulated through private society channels. Vincent Romano gripping Grace's hand outside the bridal hotel. Snow around them. Broken glass shining on his coat. Another photo showed Isabella leaving the hotel without her veil. Eyes red, flanked by DeLuca guards. A third showed the abandoned chapel. White flowers still waiting at an altar where no vows had been spoken. The story was simple enough for cruel people to enjoy. The mafia boss had chosen the seamstress over the bride. No one cared that Grace had been dragged into it. No one cared about the camera, except the people who wanted it back. Vincent kept Grace in the penthouse for 2 days. He called it protection. Grace called it a cage with better furniture. She was given a bedroom larger than her apartment, clothes in her size that no one made a cruel comment about, and meals she barely touched. A woman doctor checked her scalp where Isabella had pulled her hair. A security team appeared outside every door she entered. Vincent did not visit her the first day. That bothered her more than she wanted to admit. On the second evening, Grace found a sewing room, not a guest room with a kit tossed inside. A real sewing room. Bolts of fabric lined one wall. An industrial machine stood near the window. Pattern paper. Dress forms. Thread arranged by color. Everything expensive. Everything unused. Grace stood in the doorway, stunned. Vincent's voice came from behind her. "My sister used to sew." Grace turned. He stood in the hall, jacket off, black shirt fitted over broad shoulders, tattoos visible at his wrist where his sleeves were rolled. He looked less like a groom now and more like the man Boston feared. Dangerous, controlled, untouchable. "She lived here?" Grace asked. "Sometimes." Grace looked back at the sewing machine. "Where is she now?" Vincent's face closed. Dead. The word was final. but grief moved beneath it like something buried alive. Grace should have said she was sorry. People always said that when they did not know what else to do. Instead, she touched the edge of the table. Did she make dresses? No, she repaired things. Jackets, curtains, torn pockets. Anything people thought was too damaged to keep. Grace felt that answer in her chest. Vincent walked into the room but stayed on the opposite side of the table, as if respecting an invisible line. Her daughter is Elena, he said. Grace looked up. The hidden fear from the night before returned to her memory. You moved her because of the camera. Vincent nodded once. She is 8. The world believes my sister's child died with her, but she didn't. No. Grace absorbed that quietly. A secret child. A hidden little girl protected by one of the most dangerous men in Boston. Isabella knew. She suspected. The camera may have confirmed it. Grace's anger toward Isabella sharpened. She was going to use a child. People use whatever hurts. The flatness of his voice told Grace he had learned that young. She studied him across the sewing table. Is that why you agreed to marry her, to protect Elena? Vincent's eyes narrowed. Careful. That means yes. That means you are asking questions that get people killed. Grace stepped around the table. Vincent watched her. Warning in every line of his body. She stopped a few feet away. You brought me here because I found the camera. But you keep looking at me like I'm another weapon pointed at your life? You might be. I'm a seamstress. You found what my security missed. Because no one thinks to check the inside. Her voice softened. That doesn't just apply to dresses. For a moment, he said nothing. The snow tapped against the window behind him. Then he reached into his pocket and placed a small plastic evidence bag on the table. Inside was a piece of white thread. Can you trace it? Grace approached the table. Their shoulders nearly touched. Vincent did not move away. The thread was ordinary at first glance. Cheap polyester. But under the magnifier attached to the sewing lamp, Grace saw a faint blue fiber twisted into the white. Her breath caught. What Vincent asked. I've seen this thread before. Where? Grace closed her eyes. Remembering. The basement alteration room. A rush order. Marina standing too close. Isabella's maid bringing a robe. Not a gown. A loose hem on a flower girl dress. Not Isabella's dress. A child's dress. Grace looked at Vincent. Elena was supposed to be in the wedding. His face changed. Just barely. But enough. No one knew that. Grace's skin prickled. I altered a flower girl dress last week. No name on the order. Marina said it was for a guest's niece. White satin, tiny pearls. The inner waist had the same thread. Vincent's face went cold in a way Grace had never seen. Not anger. Murder made quiet. If the camera was in Isabella's gown, Grace whispered. And the same thread was in Elena's dress. Vincent finished for her. There may have been another device. Within 10 minutes, the penthouse became a war room. Men moved silently. Calls were made. Doors opened and closed. Vincent stood at the center of it all, calm enough to terrify everyone. Grace sat at the sewing table, sketching the flower girl dress from memory. Her hand shook only once when she remembered the small pearl bow at the waist and imagined a hidden camera pressed against a child's body. Vincent noticed. He always noticed. Take a break, he said. No. Grace. She looked up sharply. I said no. Luca stopped mid-sentence. Vincent's men stared. Vincent came toward her slowly. You think exhaustion makes you useful. I think Elena doesn't have time for me to be delicate. His eyes held hers. Something passed between them, then not romance. Not trust, but recognition. Two people who had both learned to keep going because someone vulnerable had needed them. A call came in from the North House. Luca answered on speaker. "We found the dress," a guard said. "Device in the waist seam. Disabled now." Vincent closed his eyes for half a second. Grace saw relief hit him like pain. The guard continued. "But there's a problem. Elena's asking for the seamstress." Vincent opened his eyes. Grace looked up. "What?" "She says the lady who fixed her dress told her the pearls look like snowberries. She wants to know if the lady is safe." Grace remembered then. A little girl in the basement doorway, bundled in a gray coat, smiling shyly while Marina argued on the phone. Grace had crouched to fix a loose pearl on the hem and told the child the beads looked like snowberries from a fairy tale. She had not known she was speaking to Vincent Romano's hidden heart. Vincent stared at Grace as if she had reached into his chest without permission. She stood carefully. "Tell her I'm safe." The guard paused. Vincent nodded. Luca relayed the message. After the call ended, Vincent remained silent. Grace gathered the sketches and set them aside. "You never told me she came to the hotel," Vincent said. "I didn't know who she was." "But you remembered her." Grace's expression softened despite everything. "Children are easy to remember when adults are cruel." That hit him. She saw it before he buried it. Vincent turned away, looking out at the harbor. "My sister used to say something like that." Grace waited. He did not continue. But that night, when dinner arrived, Vincent did not eat in his office. He sat across from Grace at the long black dining table while snow covered the city below. They did not speak for 10 minutes. Then he asked, "Who taught you to sew?" "My grandmother." "She alive?" "No." "Parents?" Grace smiled faintly, without warmth. "You interrogate like a romantic." "I don't do romance." "Obviously." A silence. Then, unexpectedly, his mouth curved. It vanished almost instantly, but Grace saw it. "My mother died when I was 20, she said, surprising herself. "Cancer. My father left before that. My grandmother raised me for a while. She used to say sewing was the art of believing torn things deserved patience." Vincent looked at her hands. "And do you believe that?" Grace thought of her own body, mocked in mirrors and bridal suites. Her life, stitched together from bills, grief, long shifts, and the stubborn refusal to become bitter. He tried to. Vincent leaned back. "My world does not reward patience." "No," Grace said. "It rewards fear." His eyes sharpened. "You think you understand my world after 2 days. I understand rooms where everyone smiles and no one is kind." The answer silenced him. For the first time, Vincent Romano had no immediate weapon disguised as a reply. After dinner, Grace rose to leave. Vincent stood too. She glanced at him. "You don't have to escort me to my cage." His jaw tightened. "You are not a prisoner." "Can I leave?" "No." "Then decorate the word however you want." She walked past him. Vincent caught her wrist. Not hard, but the contact sent heat straight through her anger. Grace looked down at his hand, then up at him. His eyes were dark, conflicted, too close. "I know cages," he said quietly. "This is not one." Grace's voice softened despite herself. "Then what is it?" His thumb shifted once against her pulse. A tiny movement, a betrayal of restraint, a place where I can keep you breathing. The air between them thinned. For one dangerous second, Grace thought he might touch her face. He almost did. His hand rose halfway, stopped. His fingers curled. Then he released her and stepped back as if distance were the only thing keeping him civilized. "Lock your door tonight," he said. Grace swallowed. From who? Vincent's eyes moved over her face. From me. She did not sleep after that. Neither did he. The betrayal revealed itself in layers. Marina confessed first. Not because she was loyal, because Luca terrified her more effectively than Isabella had paid her. She admitted Isabella had ordered the emergency repair. She admitted stolen jewelry had been planted in Grace's locker. She admitted the flower girl dress had been routed through the basement alteration room under a fake order. But she refused to name the person who delivered the cameras. Until Vincent placed a photo of Elena on the table. Not the child's face, just the back of her head as she stood by a window, holding a stuffed rabbit. Marina broke. Isabella said the child was the key. She sobbed. She said if the DeLucas had proof, Vincent would sign anything. Grace stood behind the glass wall of the penthouse office, watching Marina cry. She should have felt satisfied. She didn't, because Isabella was still free, because a child had been measured for betrayal, because Grace could not stop remembering Isabella's hand in her hair and the way everyone had believed the worst so easily. Vincent came out of the office. Grace looked at him. What happens now? Now Isabella invites me to negotiate. And you go. Yes. That's a trap. Obviously. She stared. You say that like it's a dinner reservation. His gaze moved over her face. You are not coming. Grace almost laughed. I wasn't offering. Good. But you need me. No. Yes. She stepped closer. You need someone who understands the stitching, the cameras, the dress orders, the hotel timeline. Marina knows pieces. I know how they fit. Vincent's face hardened. You are not bait. I didn't ask to be bait. You think walking into a room with DeLucas is bravery. It is not. It is offering your throat to people who already tried to cut it. Grace's temper rose. And hiding here while men decide what my life means is what safety. Vincent's eyes flashed. This is not about your pride. No. It's about yours. Her voice shook, but she kept going. You don't want me there because you can't control what happens if I speak. I don't want you there because if someone touches you again, I will start a war I may not be able to end. The words hit the room like thunder. Grace stopped breathing. Vincent looked as if he had not meant to say them. Luca, standing near the door, slowly looked away. Grace's voice came out quieter. Why? Vincent's stare locked on hers. Snow moved behind him. Boston blurred in white and steel. I don't know yet. It was not a confession. It was worse. A truth he did not trust. Grace should have stepped back. Instead, she whispered, That's dangerous. Vincent's gaze dropped to her mouth again. Yes. A phone rang. The moment broke. Luca answered. His expression changed immediately. Boss. Isabella's people leaked Grace's apartment address. Grace went cold. My apartment? Vincent turned sharp. Who is there? My neighbor. Grace whispered. Mrs. Alvarez. She feeds my cat when I work late. Vincent was already moving. Grace grabbed his arm. Take me. No. She won't open for men with guns. She'll open for me. Vincent stared at her. Furious. Grace stared back. Terrified. She's 74. She said. And she thinks everyone deserves soup. That did something to him. He cursed softly in Italian. Then he pointed at Luca. Bring the armored car. Grace had not seen her apartment building surrounded before. It looked smaller with black SUVs at the curb. A narrow brick building in East Boston. 3 floors. Old windows. A broken intercom. Snow gathering on the front steps. Police lights flashed at the corner, but no officers came close. Vincent's influence held the street in its fist. Grace climbed out before Luca could stop her. Vincent caught up instantly. "You stay behind me. This is my home." That does not make it safe. Inside, the hallway smelled like old wood and garlic. Mrs. Alvarez's door was cracked open. Grace's heart lurched. "Mrs. Alvarez." A tiny sound came from inside. Vincent pushed the door open with his gun raised. The apartment was torn apart. Cushions slashed. Cabinet doors open. A pot of soup spilled across the stove. Mrs. Alvarez sat on the floor near the kitchen, shaking but alive, with duct tape around one wrist where she had worked herself free. Grace ran to her. The old woman burst into tears. "They were looking for you. Mia. They said you stole from a bride. I told them you only steal buttons from old coats." Grace laughed and cried at the same time. Vincent stood above them, his face carved from stone. "Did they hurt you?" he asked. Mrs. Alvarez looked up at him. Most people trembled when Vincent Romano spoke. Mrs. Alvarez narrowed her eyes. "You the reason my Grace is on the news." Vincent blinked once. Grace froze. Luca coughed behind his hand. Vincent lowered his gun. "Yes," he said. Mrs. Alvarez pointed a shaking finger at him. "Then you fix it." Grace closed her eyes. "Mrs. Alvarez." "No." The old woman glared at Vincent. "She works hard. She pays rent early. She brings me medicine when my knees hurt. She does not steal. She does not chase married men. She does not deserve rich snakes spitting on her name." Vincent looked down at Grace. There was something almost reverent in his silence. "I know," he said. Grace felt the words more than heard them. As Luca helped Mrs. Alvarez up, Grace went to her own apartment across the hall. The door had been forced open. Her small world was destroyed. Fabric scraps scattered. Drawers overturned. Her grandmother's old sewing tin dumped on the floor. Photos cracked under muddy footprints. Grace knelt slowly and picked up a bent silver thimble. Her grandmother's, for the first time since the bridal suite. Her tears fell. She turned away before Vincent could see. But he did see. Of course he did. He entered behind her without speaking. Grace wiped her face angrily. "Don't." "I didn't say anything." "You were about to." "No," he said. "I was about to remember who did this." She looked at him then. His calm was gone. Not outwardly. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But Grace saw the violence gathering under his skin. She stood, clutching the thimble. "Don't kill people because of my apartment." His eyes lifted to hers. "They threatened your neighbor." "I know." "They came into your home." "I know." "They made you cry." Her throat tightened. "That's not a death sentence." Vincent stepped closer. "In my world, it is." Grace should have been horrified. Part of her was another part. The wounded part that had always had to defend herself alone. Felt something dark and forbidden loosen inside her chest. To be protected so fiercely was terrifying. To want it was worse. A noise came from the bedroom. Vincent moved instantly, pushing Grace behind him. A man burst from the closet with a knife. Everything happened too fast. Vincent disarmed him with brutal efficiency, slammed him into the wall, and pressed the man's own blade beneath his jaw. Grace gasped. The attacker froze, bleeding from the mouth but alive. Vincent's voice was almost gentle. "Who sent you?" The man spat a name. "Isabella." Grace's fingers dug into Vincent's sleeve. He looked down at her hand. Something in his face changed. He did not kill the man. Not because he didn't want to, because Grace was watching. That restraint shook her more than violence would have. Vincent handed the attacker to Luca's men. Then he turned to Grace. You can't go back to this life yet. She looked around her ruined apartment. I know. His voice softened by a fraction. Pack what matters. Grace laughed through her tears. It's all on the floor. Vincent bent and picked up a cracked photo of Grace and her grandmother sitting beside an old sewing machine. He studied it. Then he handed it to her carefully, as if it were more fragile than any diamond in Isabella's suite. This matters, he said. Grace took it. Their fingers brushed. This time, neither pulled away immediately. Back at the penthouse, something shifted. Vincent still did not trust easily. He still questioned everyone. He still disappeared into meetings where men spoke in low voices and came out looking pale. But with Grace, his coldness developed cracks. Small ones. A cup of tea placed silently beside her when she fell asleep over stitch diagrams. A coat over her shoulders while she stood on the balcony, watching the harbor. A new lock installed on Mrs. Alvarez's door. Her cat, Button, retrieved from the apartment and delivered to the penthouse in a carrier by a terrifying man who looked deeply offended to be holding cat treats. Grace tried not to let these things matter. They mattered. The fake relationship became public the next morning. Vincent did not ask permission. He stood outside the courthouse in a black coat while cameras flashed and Boston society devoured every second. Grace watched from the penthouse television as a reporter shouted, Mr. Romano, is Grace Miller your mistress? Vincent stopped. Slowly. He turned toward the cameras. She is under my protection, he said. Anyone who insults her will answer to me. Anyone who threatens her will answer to my family. And anyone who lies about her will wish they had chosen silence. He walked away. The clip spread faster than Isabella's rumor. By evening, Grace's name had become something else. Not mistress, not thief, protected. That word followed her everywhere. It should have made her feel safe. Instead, it made her feel claimed. She confronted him in the sewing room. You don't get to make statements about me like I'm territory. Vincent was removing his cufflinks. He paused. I kept you alive. You also made every person in Boston think I belong to you. His eyes lifted. Do you? Grace's breath caught. The question was too calm, too intimate. No, she said. Vincent walked toward her. She stood her ground. He stopped close enough that she could feel heat from his body. Good, he said. Grace blinked. Good. If you said yes because you were afraid, I would hate it. And if I said yes because I wanted to, the silence turned electric. Vincent's control almost broke. She saw it in his hands. He wanted to touch her. He wanted it badly enough to make him angry. Instead, he stepped back. Do not test me with things you are not ready to mean. Grace's cheeks burned. I'm not testing you. No, he said quietly. You're trying to understand why you feel safe with a man you should run from. Her breath left her. He had named it. Cruelly. Accurately, she looked away first. That doesn't mean I trust you. I know. It doesn't mean I like you. His mouth curved faintly. I know that too. Grace hated that the almost smile made her heart stumble. A message arrived that night from Isabella. Not to Vincent, to Grace. An unknown number sent a single photo. Elena. The child stood in a garden, holding her stuffed rabbit. Unaware someone had photographed her from beyond the fence. Below it, a message. Tell Vincent to come alone, or the little secret becomes public. Grace took the phone to Vincent with shaking hands. She expected rage. She did not expect the bloodless fear that crossed his face before he locked it away. Elena was moved. He said, but someone found her. Luca checked the image. Old angle. Maybe before the move. Vincent was already reaching for his gun. Grace grabbed his wrist. His eyes snapped to her. Don't go alone, she said. I won't risk, Elena. That's exactly why they sent it to me. They knew you would stop thinking. Vincent went dangerously still. Luca looked as if he expected the room to explode. Grace did not release his wrist. You told me I found what your security missed, she said. Then listen to me. Isabella doesn't want you dead yet. She wants you emotional. She wants you walking into a room ready to trade anything. Vincent stared at her hand on his wrist. No one touched him like that. No one stopped him. Grace forced herself not to let go. The camera in the dress wasn't only for blackmail, she continued. It was for theater. She wanted an audience. A recording. Proof. She likes humiliation. Vincent's jaw tightened. Grace whispered, so don't give her yours. His gaze lifted to hers. There it was again. Fascination turning into something darker. Dependence. Maybe the first fragile thread of it. What do you suggest? He asked. Grace swallowed. We give her theater. The plan was dangerous. Vincent hated it immediately, which was how Grace knew it might work. Isabella had demanded a meeting at St. Bartholomew's, an abandoned church near the harbor, once owned by a DeLuca shell charity. She wanted Vincent alone at midnight with documents giving the DeLucas control over several Romano shipping routes. Instead, Vincent arrived at midnight with fog rolling over the harbor and black SUVs waiting 3 blocks away with lights off. Grace arrived hidden in the back of a florist van. She wore a dark green dress Vincent had sent to the sewing room without comment. It fit perfectly. Not tight where it should have skimmed. Not apologetic. Beautiful in a way Grace had never allowed herself to request. When she saw herself in the mirror, she had cried. When Vincent saw her, he had gone completely still. He said only, no. Grace had lifted her chin. Yes? Now she stood in the cold church vestibule. A small transmitter sewn into her sleeve. Her grandmother's thimble on a chain beneath her dress. And Vincent Romano looking at her as if he wanted to lock her somewhere no one could ever reach. You stay behind me, he said. You've said that before. You ignored me before. And yet we're both still here. His eyes burned. This is not courage anymore. Grace, this is you risking your life for a war that was never yours. She stepped closer. The wind moved through broken stained glass above them. Elena remembered me, she said. Mrs. Alvarez defended me. Your sister repaired things people thought were too damaged. Maybe this war wasn't mine yesterday, but people like Isabella count on ordinary women staying ordinary. Vincent's face changed. Something inside him yielded. Painfully. He reached toward her cheek. Stopped. Grace closed the distance herself. She placed her hand over his. His palm was rough and warm against her face. For one breath, he let himself touch her. Only that. Only his hand against her cheek in the dark of an abandoned church. It felt more intimate than a kiss. If this goes wrong, he said, I will burn the city to find you. Grace whispered. Then don't let it go wrong. Isabella waited at the altar in her wedding dress. The same gown. Repaired now. Perfect again. The sight of it made Grace's stomach twist. White roses lined the aisle. Wilted from cold. Candles burned along the broken pews. Men with guns stood in the shadows. At the altar, Isabella smiled like a saint painted over a demon. Vincent, she said, you brought the seamstress. How sentimental. Vincent walked down the aisle with Grace beside him. His men were not visible. That was the point. Isabella's eyes dragged over Grace's dress. Look at that. Someone finally found fabric strong enough. Grace felt the insult. This time, it did not enter her. Vincent's voice cut through the church. Speak to her like that again, and negotiations end. Isabella's smile thinned. You embarrassed me. You betrayed me. I tried to save myself from a loveless marriage to a man who keeps secrets from his own bride. You were never my bride. For the first time, Isabella's mask cracked. Grace looked at Vincent. That was news to her too. Isabella laughed coldly. Did he not tell you? Grace, he knew I was lying before the wedding. He suspected my family. He let the ceremony happen anyway because he needed proof. Grace's chest tightened. Vincent did not look at her. Isabella saw the wound land and pushed. He used you. Your humiliation. Your little discovery. You were convenient. Grace's throat closed. The church seemed to tilt. Vincent finally turned his head. Grace. She stepped back. Not far, but enough. Enough for Vincent to feel it. Isabella smiled. There it was. Emotional manipulation. Sharpened like a blade. Grace looked at Vincent. Is that true? His silence answered first. Then he said, part of it. Pain opened in her chest. You knew something might happen upstairs. I knew Isabella might move against me. I did not know she would use you. But you let the wedding happen. Yes. Grace nodded slowly. The cold entered her bones. Vincent's eyes darkened. I have made worse choices to keep Elena alive. I believe you, Grace said. That's what hurts. Isabella clapped softly. How touching. Now, Vincent, sign the transfer papers. Hand over the camera evidence. And I will consider letting your seamstress walk out with her dignity. Vincent looked at her. You still think this is about shipping routes? Isabella's smile faded. Grace lifted her hand. The sleeve of her green dress had come loose at the cuff. A tiny lens glittered from inside the seam. Isabella stared. Grace's voice was steady. You taught me something in the bridal suite, she said. People confess more when they think they're the one holding the camera. The church doors burst open. Luca and Romano men entered from the rear. At the same moment, two DeLuca guards turned their weapons away from Vincent and toward Isabella's men. Double betrayal. But this time, Vincent had bought it first. Isabella screamed. Gunfire shattered the stained glass. Vincent moved instantly, pulling Grace behind a stone column as bullets tore through roses and candles. The church erupted into chaos, men shouting, pews splintering. Glass raining colored fragments over the aisle, like broken jewels. Grace hit the floor. Vincent covered her again. Just like the SUV, but this time, his body jerked. Once. Hard. Grace heard the sound he tried not to make. Her hands flew to his side. Warm blood spread beneath her fingers. Vincent. His jaw clenched. Stay down. You're hit. I've been worse. Don't you dare say that like it helps. A bullet cracked against the column. Vincent fired back with one hand, the other gripping Grace's waist to keep her behind him. Across the church, Isabella tried to run through the side door. Grace saw the wedding gown catch on a broken pew. The same bodice where the camera had been hidden tore open. Wires spilled out. Not one camera. 3. Vincent saw them too. His eyes went black. Luca reached Isabella. Before she escaped, she fought like a trapped animal, screaming about families, contracts, bloodlines. The insult of being replaced by some fat girl with a needle. The church went silent enough for everyone to hear it. Grace stood slowly from behind the column. Vincent tried to stop her. She moved anyway. Blood on her hands. Glass in her hair. Green dress torn at the sleeve. She walked down the aisle toward Isabella. Every man watched her. Isabella laughed wildly. "What are you going to do, hem me to death?" Grace stopped in front of her. For years, she had swallowed words until they became stones inside her. "Not tonight." "No," Grace said. "I'm going to let everyone see what you were so desperate to hide." She reached for the torn bodice and pulled out the wire bundle, exposing the hidden devices in the gown. Luca's men filmed everything. The confession, the cameras, the transfer documents, the threats against Elena. Isabella's power drained from her face. Grace looked at Vincent. He was still standing, one hand pressed to his bleeding side. Eyes fixed on her with something raw and unguarded. Fear. Not for himself. For her. That fear broke what Isabella's words had wounded. Grace turned back to the bride. "You laughed because you thought touching your dress was the closest I'd ever get to power," Grace said softly. "But I know how seams work. Pull the right thread, and the whole lie comes apart." Vincent stared at her like she had become the most dangerous woman in the room. And maybe, for that moment, she had. The DeLuca alliance collapsed before dawn. Isabella was taken alive. Not because Vincent was merciful, but because Grace had looked at him once while Luca held the bride at gunpoint. One look. That was all. Vincent lowered his hand. He would later deny that mercy had anything to do with love. No one believed him. The evidence from the church moved faster than Isabella's lies. Every private channel that had mocked Grace received footage of the hidden cameras sewn into the wedding gown. Marina's confession followed. Then, the apartment attack. Then, the threat against Elena. By sunrise, Boston knew Grace Miller had not ruined a mafia wedding. She had exposed a betrayal. Vincent collapsed in the penthouse elevator at 6:12 a.m. Grace was beside him when it happened. One moment he was standing through sheer arrogance. The next, his hands slipped from the wall and his weight dropped. "Vincent." Luca caught him before he hit the floor. But Vincent's eyes searched for Grace first. That terrified her more than the blood. At the private hospital, men filled the hallways. Doctors moved fast. Luca tried to keep Grace in the waiting room. She refused. "I have his blood on my hands," she said. "Do not tell me to sit politely." No one argued. Hours passed beneath fluorescent lights. Grace washed Vincent's blood from her skin and watched the water turn pink. She hated the color. Hated that her body remembered the weight of him shielding her. Hated that Isabella had been partly right. Vincent had used the wedding to expose betrayal, but he had also bled for Grace. Both truths lived inside her. When the doctor finally allowed her into his room, Vincent was awake. Of course he was. He looked pale, furious, and offended by the existence of medical weakness. Grace stood in the doorway. "You're supposed to be sleeping. You're supposed to be safe." She walked in slowly. A bandage wrapped his side beneath the hospital gown. Without the suit, without the gun, without men flinching around him, he should have seemed less dangerous. He didn't. He seemed more human. That was worse. Grace stopped beside his bed. "Is Elena safe?" "Yes." "Mrs. Alvarez. New apartment. Better locks. Same soup complaints." Grace smiled despite herself. Then silence returned. The real kind. The painful kind. Vincent looked at her. "You heard Isabella?" "Yes." "I suspected betrayal. I did not know where it would come from. But you let everyone enter that room knowing something might break." "Yes." Grace nodded. Thank you for not lying. His jaw tightened. Do you hate me? I should. That is not an answer. Grace sat in the chair beside his bed. I hate that part of me understands why you did it. I hate that you scare me. I hate that when the shooting started, the safest place in the world was under your body. His eyes closed briefly. Grace's voice trembled. I hate that I don't know how to go back to being invisible after being seen by you. Vincent turned his head toward her. All the coldness was gone now. But not because he had become soft. Because pain had stripped him down to the truth beneath the armor. I saw you before I trusted you, he said. Grace's breath caught. I saw you on that floor with your hand closed. Everyone shouting. Everyone lying. And you looked at me like you were afraid? But you still asked what would happen if you opened your hand. His voice lowered. I have ruled men for 15 years. I have watched powerful people beg. I have watched brave men break. But you, Grace Miller, kneeling in that room while they tried to make you small. He stopped. Grace's eyes burned. Vincent reached for her hand. This time, she let him take it. You made me curious, he said. Then you made me careful. Then you made me afraid. Afraid of what? His thumb moved over her knuckles. Losing something I never meant to want. Grace looked down at their joined hands. You don't get to own me. Vincent. No. You don't get to decide my life because you're scared. No. You don't get to call protection love and expect me not to know the difference. His mouth curved faintly, pained and proud. No. She looked at him. So what do you get? Vincent's grip tightened just slightly. The chance to earn the difference. Grace wanted to cry. Instead, she leaned closer and pressed her forehead against his hand. It was not forgiveness. Not fully, but it was a beginning. And for Vincent Romano, who had built an empire on taking, being allowed to earn something felt more dangerous than any war. 3 months later, the basement alteration room of the Montclair Bridal Hotel no longer existed, not as it had been. The old fluorescent lights were gone, the cracked tile replaced. The coffee machine retired with honors by Mrs. Alvarez, who insisted it had suffered enough. In its place stood Miller House Atelier, a bright, elegant studio with tall mirrors, velvet chairs, and a brass plaque by the door. Grace Miller, owner and head seamstress. Not Vincent's name, not Romano money displayed like ownership. Grace's. He had offered to buy the entire hotel and give it to her. She had told him that was not romantic. That was alarming. So instead, she negotiated. A real lease, her own company, her own staff, her own rules. No bride was allowed to insult anyone in her atelier. The first woman who tried found herself escorted out by a smiling receptionist and 2 very large men who claimed to be building security. Though everyone in Boston knew better, Grace became known for impossible repairs. Not just dresses, reputations, confidence. Women who had been told they were too large, too plain, too old, too much. Grace dressed them like they deserved to be looked at without cruelty. Some clients came for the scandal. Most stayed because Grace understood the secret language of seams. Vincent came every Thursday after closing. Always in black. Always with guards who waited outside. Always pretending he had a reason. A contract to review. A security concern. A button missing from his cuff. Grace always pretended to believe him. On a snowy evening in March, he arrived with Elena. The little girl wore a blue coat and held her stuffed rabbit by one ear. She ran to Grace immediately. You said pearls look like snowberries, Elena announced. Uncle Vincent said snowberries are not real. Grace looked over Elena's head at Vincent. He's wrong. Vincent lifted an eyebrow. Grace crouched. Some things are real because someone kind imagined them first. Elena considered this deeply, then nodded. Vincent watched Grace with the child, and something quiet moved across his face. Grace saw it. The man who could terrify a city was helpless before tenderness. After Elena fell asleep on the atelier sofa beneath a roll of satin, Vincent stood beside Grace near the front window. Snow drifted over Boston. Across the street, the bridal hotel glowed gold. 3 months earlier, Grace had walked into that building invisible. Now women crossed the city to be seen by her. Vincent held out a small box. Grace stared at it. If that's a ring, I'm throwing it at you. His mouth curved. It is not a ring. She narrowed her eyes. You look too pleased with yourself. I often do. Vincent. He opened the box. Inside lay a tiny black camera, crushed flat and sealed beneath glass, set into a silver frame like a strange pendant. Grace went still. The first one, he said. From the dress. Her throat tightened. You kept it. I keep reminders. Of betrayal. Of the moment my life changed direction. Grace looked up. His voice was calm, but his eyes were not. I had it sealed so it can never record anything again. She touched the glass. The thing that had nearly destroyed her had been made harmless. Contained. Transformed. Like a torn seam repaired so carefully, the damage became part of the design. I don't know whether this is disturbing or beautiful, she whispered. With us, Vincent said, it may always be both. Grace laughed softly. Then the laugh faded. He stepped closer. Not touching. Waiting. He had learned that the waiting. The asking without words. Grace lifted her face. You can kiss me now. His control broke quietly. Vincent cupped her face with both hands, as if she were something precious and dangerous, and finally within reach. His mouth touched hers slowly at first, restrained even now, giving her room to pull away. She did not. Grace kissed him back, and the city outside disappeared. There was no bridal suite, no mocking bridesmaids, no hidden camera, no blood on church stone, no rumors, no shame. Only Vincent's hands trembling slightly against her face. Only Grace standing fully in her own life. No longer shrinking. No longer invisible. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said. The words sounded unfamiliar in his voice. Not weak. Not soft. Costly. Grace closed her eyes. I know. His breath warmed her mouth. That is a cruel answer. She smiled. I learned from dangerous people. Vincent's quiet laugh moved through her. Then she opened her eyes. I love you too, she whispered, but I'm still not yours. His thumb brushed her cheek. No, he said. You are not mine. Grace waited. Vincent looked at her as if every empire he had built was suddenly less important than getting the next words right. I am yours, he said. Behind them, Elena stirred in her sleep and murmured something about snowberries. Grace smiled through tears. Vincent wrapped his coat around her shoulders and drew her carefully against him. Not to hide her, not to claim her, but to stand with her in the golden light of the atelier she had built from the ruins of humiliation. Outside, black SUVs waited beneath falling snow. Inside, a crushed camera rested in a silver box. And Grace Miller, the woman they had laughed at for touching a wedding dress, stood in the arms of the most feared man in Boston, no longer a scandal, no longer a secret, no longer invisible. Vincent looked down at her. Marry me someday, he said. Grace raised an eyebrow. That was not a question. I am practicing patience. Try again. He exhaled, almost smiling. Grace Miller. When you are ready. When you choose it freely. When there is no war forcing your hand and no danger stealing your answer, will you let me spend the rest of my life earning you? Grace's heart broke open softly. No diamonds. No audience. No altar built from politics. Just snow. Satin. A sleeping child. And a dangerous man learning how to ask. She touched the scar on his cheek from the first attack. The one he had gotten while shielding her. Someday, she said. Vincent's eyes darkened with relief and hunger and devotion. For now, Grace leaned into him. For now, you can walk me home. His arm tightened around her. I bought the building. Vincent. For security. She gave him a look. He kissed her forehead. Patience, he reminded her. Grace laughed. And this time the sound did not come from pain. It filled the atelier. Warm. Alive. Herse. Vincent opened the door for her. And the winter air rushed in. Bright with snow, his men straightened outside. The city lights shimmered against the street. Grace stepped out first. Not behind him. Beside him. And as Boston watched the mafia boss walk through the snow with the seamstress who had unraveled a bride's betrayal, Vincent Romano lowered his head to Grace's ear and spoke the words that would follow her into every dangerous, beautiful tomorrow after. You were never the woman in the basement, he said. You were the thread holding the whole truth together. Grace looked up at him. And, for once, she did not look away. The snow kept falling. The city kept whispering. And somewhere behind them, in a locked silver box, the dead camera reflected nothing at all.